What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Fight Out podcast. UK MMA fans, we've got a big weekend. Obviously, with Paddy the Baddy fighting for the belt against Justin Gaethje at UFC 324. Obviously, first and foremost, Happy New Year. The plan for this year is to do a fight prediction for every numbered card, along with some fun stuff that we've got lined up with along the way as well. First one is perfect. I'm someone who went to school with Paddy, 2 years below him, live literally round the corner from him, well, until he moved to his big new house. And yeah, this is the perfect card for me to kick off the year. So the plan is we'll give you some predictions, we'll give you some value for money bets and stuff like that, and we'll see how far we can get along. Eventually, the plan is also to do a kind of train bet. I think the UFC, especially in the UK with the odds, there's a lot of money to be won. So without further ado, let's get into the card that is UFC 324. Now, I'm not going to drag you along. I'm hoping that you'll stay to the end to see the full bet regardless. But the first fight we're going to discuss is the main event, Paddy versus Gaethje. Now, Paddy has been on a good run since he's been in the UFC. Each time he fights up in, skill, up in, trajectory, whatever you want to call it, with each individual opponent. Justin Gaethje, however, has fought everybody. He fought the who's who. From Khabib, the only person you could argue that he hasn't fought at lightweight is Islam. Obviously, Justin Gaethje is on the back end of his career. I'm big on mindset and psychology, and that's why I actually kind of got into doing this podcast. I wanted to talk more about the psychology of fighters and interview them and stuff like that. I've pivoted for now, but that is something that I will eventually do as well. And the psychology of Justin Gaethje for me is very interesting lately, especially when you talk or when you see him and Trevor Whitman talking. They're very much talking about this is the last show, this is the last run at a title. If he gets beat, this is his last fight, etc. And like Uncle Dana always said, if you think about retirement, you probably should go ahead and do it. Now, Gaethje the last time out against Rafael Fiziev, he looked good, looked very good. The time before against Max Holloway, he didn't quite look the same. And I remember doing a video around that time, kind of saying, have we seen the best days of Justin Gaethje? Now, he's come out recently and said the mindset for the Holloway fight was all wrong. He was going in there looking at it as a fun fight, etc. But I just think that teed up with where Paddy's at on his trajectory, where Gaethje's at in his career. It's not an old school Justin Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett fight, to be honest. And I think that is quite obvious. So the question then becomes where Paddy is currently at, in his potential. Does it beat this version of Justin Gaethje? And I think confidence and mindset goes a lot into it. Now, I actually believe that Justin Gaethje for this fight will be as dangerous as he's ever been. Because on the flip side of saying, this is my last run, etc., he's got nothing to lose. Like, if he loses the fight, he retires. It sounds like he's already accepted that in his mind. And a man with nothing to lose is a dangerous man. On top of that, I've seen him saying, I want to, knock this English kid's head off. I want to do this to him. I want to do that to him. And I think he is going to be a very, very dangerous version of Justin Gaethje, which could actually play into Paddy's hands more than I think people are actually letting on. Now, Paddy's not a sniper. Paddy's not someone who's an amazing counter striker or anything like that. But if Paddy gets you out of your game and gets you into his and gets you to the ground, most importantly, like we've seen with Michael Chandler, he's absolutely going to tie you up in a knot and you're going to end up with your own fingers up your ass. And to be honest, I think Paddy via sub is a very interesting bet for this fight. I think Gaethje's going to be loading up on punches, and I think Paddy's going to play a very good leg kick game and be able to kind of pick him off with the legs, and then eventually, I think Paddy's going to go for a takedown. Whether Paddy can get him down is whether or not this whole bet can come off. Obviously, if Paddy can't get him down, he can't sub him. And I know that he took down Michael Chandler, but Justin Gaethje is as good as, if not a better wrestler than Michael Chandler when you're talking about core wrestling anyway. Paddy's wrestling is different. It's almost like UK MMA style wrestling, which if anyone's watching in the US, it's quite hard to understand. It's different. It's not Division 1 wrestling. It's not wrestling at its core. It's like a new style of it. And well, not a new style, but a different style of it. And I think Paddy via sub is a very interesting bet, and it is one that I'm doing. I'm just getting the odds up now, so I can put this into an accumulator. But Paddy via sub is 11.28, which means if you just put £10 on that, you get £23 back. And I think that's definitely good value for money With that being said, Justin by KO/TKO is also 7-2. So if you put a tenner on that, you get 45 back. It depends on what way you see the fight going. Here, I'm going for Paddy via sub in the main event. The co-main events, promoted co-main events, if you will, is Sean O'Malley versus Song Yadong. Now, this is, again, when you're talking about mindset and stuff like that, this is a very, very interesting fight. Obviously, Sean O'Malley's coming off 2 losses back-to-back against Marab. Song Yadong's on a nice little run, to be fair. But in the past, he definitely has been someone that like win one, loss one. I know he did lose to Piotr Jan and then he beat Henry Cejudo. Before that, he beat Ricky Simon, he beat Chris Gutierrez, and he was fighting kind of who's who in a way. Corey Sandhagen obviously got the better of him as well. But Song Yadong's on a very interesting trajectory right now. I don't know if he's, championship caliber, going to win the belt type of fighter. I don't think he is, in my opinion. Do I think Sean O'Malley could still win a belt inside of the UFC? I'm going to say yeah. And I think Sean O'Malley, outside of, the Marab kind of matchup, is a very tricky fighter. Sean O'Malley is a sniper. There's not a man in that division that he can't knock out, including Piotr Jan, who is the current champ. Sean beat him, dubious decisions. Some people had it Piotr's way, some people had it Sean's way. It was a 3-round fight. And that is one big reason that I think plays into this fight as well. Sean O'Malley over 3 rounds is very dangerous. Sean O'Malley over 5 rounds is a little bit different. And, it's kind of like Conor. If he doesn't get you out of there early, you do favour yourself going into the later rounds. But with that being said, in that first Marab fight, Sean O'Malley come on in the later rounds. So I think he shocked a lot of people with that. Ultimately, he lost 3-2 or 4-1, depending on how you scored it. But in this fight, I think the mindset is going to be important. And Sean himself has talked about he wanted to be the big superstar in the UFC. He didn't think that he got to that number 1 spot. He felt like he was 2 or 3 or 4 maybe. And I think that is actually what's driving him right now. Not necessarily the belt, but the fact that is driving him. If he wants to be a superstar, he needs to beat the likes of Song Yadong and beat him by a knockout. I'm going to very dubiously just say I think Sean O'Malley's going to win. I'm torn on the method, if you will, and there's an option on Sky Bet in the UK where you can do Sean O'Malley via KO/TKO or on points, which is what I'm actually going to go for, and that is 4-9. If you just wanted Sean O'Malley to win, obviously he's 1-2, very similar odds, slightly shorter. Actually, yeah, it's shorter if you're saying by TKO points. You may as well actually just do Sean O'Malley to win. In hindsight, actually, if you're in the UK, unless you are going to pick via points, which is 11-10, and via KO/TKO, which is 10-3. I'm actually going to go Sean O'Malley via points at 11-10. I think that's really good value for money, especially when you tee it up with a Paddy via sub. Now, moving further down the card, there's conflicting running orders, so forgive me, if I'm wrong on this, if you will. But next on the card that I was looking at is Thug Rose versus Natalia Silva. Now, I'll be honest, I was one of those that kind of wrote off Rose Namajunas when I seen the fight. She was meant to fight somebody else at first, and then when I seen it was Natalia Silva, I thought, oof, that's like quite a tough fight for Rose with the run that she's on. Like, Natalia Silva is on an absolute tear. She's in a very good spot. But when you're looking at the caliber of fighter that Thug Rose has fought, she beat Lily Young twice. She's fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She's fought the who's who in the women's division. And I know you can only fight the people in front of you, but obviously this is kind of like an old guard versus new guard kind of situation, even though Natalia Silva is not this, majorly young fighter or anything. I'm not saying that. She's 28 or 29, I believe. But yeah, with Rose, I think that this could be the perfect opportunity for Rose to get herself back in amongst the, title contention, the who's who in the division. And Rose Namajunas in the UK is very big odds. She's 11-4 just to win the fight. Natalia Silva is 1-4. So basically, you put a tenner on Natalia Silva, you get 12.50 back. You put a tenner on Rose Namajunas at 11-4, you are going to be getting around £40 back. Now, if you add that to the treble, just Rose Namajunas to win, Sean O'Malley via points, Paddy Pimblett via sub, you're already at 17 or 18-1 as a bet, just as a treble, which is obviously including an underdog, and two favourites, but actually picking their methods of victory, which is always a tricky bet to kind of nail. But I actually like that bet a lot. I know that this is the risk on this. So, if people are here trying to make money, it's one of them. How much do you fancy Rose Namajunas to win? Because if you do, she's really, really good odds and value for money. If you don't, you're unsure, leave this one off because you can get a builder along the way. And, that's what we actually advise here. So next on the card is Cortez Acosta fighting Derek Lewis. Again, I'm going to go back to mindset. I've seen a lot on Derek saying, he's changed his ways. He's thinner now and this and that. He's more dialed in. He's ready and all that kind of stuff. But with Cortez Acosta, the only person who's beaten him is Sergey Pavlovich inside of the UFC, I believe. No, that is wrong. He also got beat by De Lima as well, didn't he? So he's only lost over realistically to Sergey Pavlovich since he went on that run. And Sergey Pavlovich has also beaten Derek Lewis. And until Tom Aspinall sent him into the shadow realm, he was the most feared man in the heavyweight division. Now, Sergey Pavlovich is definitely, on a resurgence, can definitely get back up to title contention. But I think timing is key for when you fight people. And I think with Derek Lewis, maybe if Cortez Acosta would have fought Derek Lewis around the time that he fought Pavlovich or a little bit earlier, you might sway towards Lewis. But Lewis has been a little bit lose one, win one, lose two, win two, kind of since in the UFC. He's one of my favourite fighters. He's always entertaining unless he's fighting Francis Ngannou. But when you're looking at Derek Lewis, he got beat by Jailton Almeida, he got beat by Pavlovich, he got beat by Spivak. I think outside of Pavlovich, Acosta's beat Spivak. I think he beat Jailton Almeida, to be honest. I think Jailton Almeida and him are kind of, fighting out for who's next to once the heavyweight picture sorts itself out. And I just think from that and the fact that Walter Acosta has only been beaten twice total, he's hungry, he's on the up, if you will. Derek Lewis has kind of been at the top four for titles, all that kind of stuff. Walter Acosta's in his 30s, this is kind of his chance. And I think that mindset plays into who's going to win the fight. Obviously, he's a big favourite anyway. The odds are 1-3 for Cortez Acosta and 9-4 for Derek Lewis. And I think 1-3, to be honest, is good odds because he could have been a lot shorter than that. Not good odds, but like I said, he could have been a lot shorter. So I am going with Cortez Acosta to get the win. Not picking a method, just straight up to win the fight. And I believe that he will fight for the belt in 2027 against Tom Aspinall. And I think Tom Aspinall will send him to the shadow realm like he does everyone else, unless you poke him in the eye. And then that goes down to the first fight on the main card in the order that I've got. Don't come at me too much if this is wrong. The order's changing all the time on the UFC website, Skybet, Google. It's always different. But it's Arnold Allen versus John Silver. So Arnold Allen's getting rolled off for this fight majorly. And I think it partially comes down to how active, Arnold Allen is overall. Gene Silva last fought in September 2025. Obviously, he got beat by Diego Lopez. And if I'm being honest, I'm a big fan of Gene Silva. I'm not knocking him. But that was the biggest name he's ever fought. And that's probably the only big name he's ever fought. I think that Arnold Allen has fought a lot tougher people than Gene Silva. But his activity is killing him. And that's what is worrying for me with this pick. Because if this was on, if this was active Arnold Allen, I'd have Arnold Allen every day of the week. But I think that's why his odds are what they are. Because usually in the UK fighter will get a slight little increase of his odds. If he's not a favourite, he won't be necessarily too wide. But the UK kind of odds makers are still not as switched on with MMA, so there is good value. Arnold Allen's 9-4 to win. And, he's been beat by Max. He got beat by Mozart. But he beat Dan Hooker. I know, okay, completed Dan Hooker, whatever you want to say. But I was at that event and he absolutely blew him to bits. Come out, took his head off, and that was it. Beat Calvin Kattar. He beat Giga Chikadze. And it's just, he's on a better, he's fought better people than I think Gene Silva has, where Gene Silva's only fought Lopez and he lost. Now, don't get me wrong, I think if Volk win in the division, Lopez would be the champ. But other than that, he's fought Bryce Mitchell and Drew Dober. You know what I mean? And I just think with that level of opposition, you've got to fancy Arnold Allen going into that fight. Teed up with the fact that if you look at it another way, he hasn't been active. He's had a lot of time to sit there and think on the sidelines, and then he's come back and he's picked a tough matchup. You know, Gene Silver's going to bring the fight. Arnold Allen could have come in and probably fought, you know, Samantha can basically anyone that was in the top 15 that he thinks I can roll through these. But Gene Silver gets him close to the title contention, gets him right back up there after a couple of losses, and then one win against Giga. And I just think that says a bit about Arnold Allen's mindset. So Arnold Allen at 9-4 is going to conclude the five-fold bet. Now, like I said, we're going to try and make some money this year on this channel through the betting. So that five-fold comes out at 80-1 on Sky Bet in the UK. So let me just recap it for you. We've got Arnold Allen just to win the fight outright at 9-4. We've got Waldo Cortez Acosta to win the fight outright at 1-3. We've got Rosen and Eunice to win the fight outright at 11-4. Like I said, that is the risk. Follow me in on that one if you're as confident in Thug Rose as I am. But if not, take that off. Your odds are still good. Without Rose, it's still coming out at 20-1 just for the fourfold, because then we've got Sugar Sean O'Malley to win via points and Paddy to win via sub. Now, I've been going back and forth on the Paddy sub myself, but the interesting thing is Paddy via points is 5-1. So in the UK, we're not fancying this to go the distance. And like I said, the UK odds makers for MMA are a little bit all over the place. But I think someone's getting finished in this main event, and I'm just not sure who it is. You know, my heart and everything in me is wanting it to be Paddy, and I believe it can be Paddy. And something in my head's just saying he's going to get caught, and I just don't want that to happen. That is not why I'm picking Paddy via sub for the record. I do believe Paddy can win this fight via sub, and that kind of is why I've gone with that pick. So let me know what you think of my predictions. Let me know if you agree down in the comments. Like I said, we've got some good stuff coming. If you want to win some money, follow me in with this. There's better winner. I'm telling you, 80-1 five-fold, big odds, big weekend for UK fight fans. Unfortunately, we are fight out this weekend. We've got to stay up, but I'll be active on Twitter. I'll be active over there. Might even make a Threads account for it, to be honest, just to talk to some people, talk about the fights while we're up all night, talking nonsense, talking shite and watching fights, as we initially coined for the phrase on this channel. So thank you if you got this far into the video. If you can like, comment, if you like what we're doing, subscribe. It would mean a lot and help us out. And we'll see you in the next one.